bringing the people behind our food to life.
So now I'll work on the shoulder. First things first, we need to take off the trotter and the hock. Trotters can be a little scary, but they're actually the best part of the pig in my opinion. The reason for that is that there's a lot of gelatin in this trotter. So if you put this in your stock pot, the gelatin starts to seep out over time as you cook it on low, and that's going to not only thicken the stock, but it's going to make the flavor much more intense. So I tend to use the trotters in my stock pot. If I have a larger trotter that has a little more meat in it, I'll actually bone it out and put ground sausage and herbs and then tie it up, and I'll poach that in my stock. So to take the trotter off, you're going to use your small boning knife, and you're going to kind of wiggle it around and figure out where the articulation between the bones are. So there's a ball and socket there that you want to try and find. So I'm just going to take my knife and pretty much just score around there. And if I'm lucky, I'll actually get right where those two bones meet. So I don't even need to use my saw. All I need to do is just kind of jiggle my knife in there to release the tendon and take that trotter off. Like that. Then we've got our hock. This is a nice sized hock. I'll usually try and look for that elbow, and I'll go just a little bit above that elbow for my hock. If you want to leave more meat on the shoulder for sausage, say, that's fine, but let that kind of be your guideline. So again, I'm going to use my knife to score. And whenever you're working on your pig, really try to move the primals around so they're working for you. If you feel like you're at an awkward angle, then move this so that it's closer to your body, you're standing up straight, and you have a good angle with your knife. So I've cut through the skin there and the flesh, so now I'm going to use my saw to get through that leg bone. And this is something you can also do before you turn your pig into primals. I think I've gotten through that. Okay, so there's a nice hock. So you can also stuff this like you would the trotter, or you can just leave that bone in, set it in brine for about 2 days or so, and then smoke this, and then put that in a pot of beans. Delicious. So there's our shoulder. So now we have the copa, which runs like this. We have the Boston butt, which is the copa plus a few more little muscles right in here. And we have the picnic. Now traditionally, the picnic is used to make ground sausage, and the copa or the Boston butt are typically roasted slow with lots of smoke, and then it just starts to fall apart. There's beautiful fat in there. You get pulled pork. In France, you get what's called estouffade. In Italy, you get what they call Chianti tuna. And the idea is that you're salting it, cooking it in some sort of liquid, wine, beer, milk, water, stock, and just letting it all break down. So you can turn this into 2 large bone-in roast by simply sawing. I like to actually take the bone out on the shoulder, so I'll show you how to do that. So you'll recognize what I'm about to do is just like what I did taking these ribs off the belly. So again, I'm just sticking my knife under there and letting the articulation between the bone and the muscle guide me, and I'm pushing up towards the ribs. Now, when I get to about here, I'm going to be really careful because I don't want to cut into this beautiful copa here. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to start working up here on that spine. And always make sure you can see where the point of your knife is. So that's why I'm pulling this back so that I can see exactly where it's going. If you can't see where it's going, you're likely to cut into something pretty valuable. And look how this is just wanting to kind of pull off. So my knife is barely doing any work. And then we've got a few what we call feather bones because they actually are about as thin as feathers. So I just got to get under there and release those, and we're done. So here we've got nice bones. I like to leave a little meat on those bones for stocks, but that can go right into the stock pot. And then what we've got left is, again, the copa, or Boston butt, and the picnic. So for the copa, I like to sort of keep it on its own, but I keep this fat and skin on for cooking. So you can see where this muscle group ends right here. So I'm just going to cut straight down, and I'm hitting the shoulder blade there, so I'm going to cut over that. And then I just take the tip of my knife and carve along the top of that shoulder blade, just around it. Like so, to just release it from that shoulder blade. So I can go ahead, there's a little gap there, but that's fine. You can just go ahead and you can stick some herbs in there, some salt. And then I would tie this up and again, salt it, pepper it, slow braise it, slow roast it, cook it in the best tasting liquid you can find. This is my favorite cut of the entire pig and it is so overlooked. So keep your copa intact. Okay, so now we have the picnic. This is where the leg was. We have a bone there that's coming in this way and meeting up with the shoulder blade. This is the shoulder blade right here. So I'm going to, again, open this like a book to reveal what's beneath and try to get that bone out. So I'm going to kind of cut diagonally across to try and get these muscle groups off this shoulder blade as much as possible, and to also reveal where that leg bone is. At the same time, I'm following seams. So you can see here, there's kind of a bluish, whitish fascia there. That's my guide. That's always my guide when I butcher. So I can stick my fingers in there and basically pull it apart with my hands if I want to. So I'm going to say, okay, here's one little roast. This fascia is telling me where to cut. Okay. Go ahead and just cut this funny shaped little roast off here. It almost looks like a fake copa in a way. And this I can also tie up as a roast, roll it up, leave that skin and fat on. So that's another roast. Now this part of the picnic I actually will use all for shoulder. So I don't have to be quite as precise when I'm cutting this off, but I do like to keep large chunks intact. I'm just slicing this off and this will go into grind. Now you'll see there's a little bit of blood and what looks almost like bone fluid basically. You want to cut that out, but that's basically ready to go into the grinder. And now I revealed where that arm bone comes in and hits the shoulder bone. So my goal here is to do kind of what I did with that trotter in the beginning, which is to find that articulation of the ball and socket, which is right there. So I've released that tendon by just jiggling my knife in and around that ball and socket joint. And then I'm just carving around this shoulder blade. And this can be a bit of a tricky bone to get out. And partially it's because the shoulder blade underneath here comes down like this. So it's not as intuitive as, say, just a regular leg bone. There's a lot of meat in and under there that can be really difficult to keep it on the shoulder. So what I like to do is try to work at the top where it's a little less complicated and release it that way. And then when I've released it enough, hopefully, I can take my towel and just rip that right off. And that's going to be a much cleaner cut now because I can see exactly the shape of that bone. So all that meat will stay with the shoulder roast, like so. Okay, so there's that shoulder blade. There's that funny shape that's hard to really get your knife into precisely, okay? And then I just need to cut out this leg bone, which is much easier to do. And again, if you leave a little bit of meat on the bone, that's fine, because you're going to stick it in your stock pot, and you want a little meat in your stock. That's what's going to flavor it. So you're just working around that big ball at the end of the bone, which can get a little tricky. There's a couple of little pieces of sinew in there that keep it on there. Okay, so now we've got this sort of funny looking piece of meat. This is why people will often turn this into sausage, but this can also be a roast. I often will actually take my knife and kind of cut it up like this. Get salt in there, get lots of herbs in there, get breadcrumbs in there, and then go ahead and roll it up, tie it, and that's going to be a beautiful roast as well. You can trim off these little pieces that are hanging right here to make it look pretty, but that's going to taste good. Or you can turn it into sausage meat, which requires you basically to take all this skin off. And I try to leave as much fat as I can on the meat. Shoulder is the best meat to use for sausage because it has usually has the perfect ratio of fat to meat if you leave all that fat on, or as much as you can. And the skin is also actually very flavorful. I will take pieces of skin about this big, roll it up like that and tie it, and just keep those pieces in my freezer, and then I'll use that, throw that into a stock pot. You can also fry it up, make chicharrones. Sometimes if I have a leaner cut of meat, like say venison or lamb, for instance, I will keep these pieces of pork skin and actually wrap the pork skin around that lean roast or lean piece of meat, and that provides moisture and fat to flavor the meat, and it keeps it moist as well, so it won't dry out as quickly. There's some lovely pieces of skin, and there's our picnic.